Greetings, YouTube. I don't like unemployment numbers because unemployment numbers is using a metric which is a real false piece of data in my book. It just says that people are working. It doesn't say they're working good jobs. It just says they're working. It's like saying that someone's eating, but they're eating nothing but jelly beans. Doesn't mean they're eating well, but they are eating now, aren't they? I'm going to post to a Metafilter discussion, and in it they did a study of 53 million Americans who aged between 18 and 64. 44% of people between 18 and 64 are barely making enough to live on. They're employed, but they're working literal poverty wages. I mean, there are people who work at Walmart who get food stamps. So I have always proposed the idea of having a living wage. For as long as I can remember, I've always felt that a single person working should make enough money to support two people. Food, housing, health care, transportation. Four things. Education should be provided by our tax dollars in my book. Apparently, cat here. And I say two people because it could be a kid, it could be a partner who is staying home to take care of kids. It could be lots of different things, but you need to be able to make enough for two people on one salary. Now, some businesses are sleazy, and if everything's based on a 40-hour work week, they'll hire people to work 35 hours or even 39 hours just so they don't have to count as full-time employees. I don't care how you want to break it down. A single job should pay for two people. Now, if we were to bring the minimum wage up to what it is today, if you'd pegged it to inflation the way it should have been back in 78, it'd be about 22 bucks an hour. But if you went from 7.25, which is immoral, to 22 bucks an hour, most prices would increase with it, and so your effective buying power would not be that great. Now, it needs to be much higher than it is, and currently most people in the progressive community are talking at a $15 an hour minimum wage. But we also have to make sure that the costs I mentioned are still within reach of that pay grade. So that may require with means-based rents that you can only charge so much based on how much the person makes. And you'd have to come some kind of formula and such and like that. And it's going to make some landlords very, very unhappy because they can no longer just milk people for everything they're worth. Nobody should be paying more than about a quarter of what they make in rent. Maybe a third, depending on where they live and what kind of accommodations it has. But there are people out there paying more than half of their paycheck just trying to survive by putting a roof over their heads. Now, I have a mortgage, and we make our mortgage. But it's not by a generous margin. And we have two adults working two full-time jobs, one of which I've been at for more than 20 years, and I make a decent wage compared to the cost of living in the community that I live in. And we make our mortgage, but again, not by a generous margin. But we're okay. But if one of us loses our job, we're in trouble. That would be a serious problem for us. And we're pretty well employed. What about the people working for a minimum wage out there? What about the people working at Walmart who can't feed their kids? Who are walking to work because they have no transportation, or depending on bad public transportation. And where I live, the public transportation is bad. Take my word for it. It was bad when I used to use it. It's bad now. We need to make sure that the numbers of unemployment reflect people who are employed and able to take care of all their needs, and it doesn't. All it does is make people feel good because they can say, oh, look at lots of people are working. We should not be gauging people by how much labor we can extract from them. That's one of the problems with capitalism. It is not a virtue. There pretty much aren't any virtues in capitalism, as anybody who has taken off the blinders can see. We need to make sure that people can survive, people can thrive, that their lives are not doomed to wage slavery. that housing and food and healthcare and transportation, these are things that should be baked into our society, and we should make sure that no one suffers for them and that everyone has what they need. No one should be left behind.